Red Skelton was not just a comedian, he was a national treasure, a man who could make an entire country laugh even in its darkest days. Yet behind that big smile and playful voice was a pain so heavy that he carried it like a secret shadow all his life. Imagine America in the 1940s and 1950s, where radios and televisions were glowing with families gathered around, waiting for laughter, waiting for escape from war, from worries, from the cold realities of life. And there was Red Skelton, larger than life, painting his face with joy, playing clowns, fools, and dreamers, making people forget their problems for just a little while. To millions, he was the face of innocence, of laughter, of pure comedy that children and grandparents alike could enjoy. But while the world laughed with him, no one knew the tears he fought to hide when the lights went out. The question is, what was he hiding? How could a man so full of joy carry so much sorrow? This is not just a story of a comedian. It's the story of a man who gave his heart to the world, but behind the curtains, battled tragedies that almost broke him. His life was like a stage where the spotlight showed only half the truth. And tonight we pull back that curtain. Because to understand Red Skelton, you must understand both his laughter and his silence, both the applause and the nights he spent alone with memories he never spoke about. Every smile he gave the world was built on a foundation of pain, and the secret he carried was not small. It was life-changing, heartbreaking, and yet it made him who he was. So before we dive into his success, before we celebrate the king of clean comedy, let us ask, what happens when the man who makes everyone laugh cannot heal his own wounds? What happens when the clown's painted smile hides a heart full of grief? The answer lies in the story you're about to hear, a story that begins with joy, moves through shadows, and leaves behind lessons about the fragility of life, fame, and the human spirit. And once you know the truth about Red Skelton, you will never look at laughter the same way again. Red Skelton's journey to fame did not begin with lights, laughter, or applause. It began in the shadows of hardship. Born in 1913 in Vincennes, Indiana, Red's life was touched by tragedy before he even took his first steps. His father, a humble grocer who also worked as a clown, died just 2 months before Red was born. That meant Red never knew the man who had given him his name, and his childhood was spent not in comfort, but in poverty. His mother struggled to keep the family afloat, working odd jobs and barely managing to put food on the table. Red learned quickly that life was not going to hand him anything easily, and perhaps that is why he discovered comedy, not as entertainment, but as survival. He began performing at the age of 7, selling newspapers and telling jokes just to catch people's attention. At 14, he joined a traveling medicine show, and soon after, he found his way into the world of vaudeville. On stage, he created characters that audiences adored. Simple, funny, innocent characters who could make people laugh without ever crossing into cruelty. That gift made him stand out, and by the 1930s and 1940s, he was on the radio, then Hollywood, and then television. America embraced him. His Red Skelton show became one of the longest-running programs, loved for its wholesome comedy. Parents felt safe letting their children watch, and adults found joy in his slapstick humor. But even as his career soared and his smile became famous, there was a quiet truth that lingered behind the curtain. The boy who had grown up with loss and loneliness never truly escaped it. Success gave him money, houses, and fame, but it could not fill the empty places in his heart. And as the applause grew louder, so too did the silence he carried inside. The stage was his escape, but when the curtain fell, he was still the little boy without a father, still the man searching for something laughter could never replace. And this unhealed wound was only the beginning of what would shape his life into both comedy and tragedy. Because what came next would test his spirit in ways even he could never have joked about. By the 1950s, Red Skelton was a household name. His show was not just entertainment, it was tradition, Families would gather around the television each week, waiting to see Clem Cadiddlehopper or Freddie the Freeloader, characters who were silly, foolish, yet somehow deeply human. Red had the rare ability to make people laugh without using vulgarity or cruelty. He once said he never needed a dirty joke to get a clean laugh. He became the symbol of family-friendly comedy, a man whose humor felt like a warm embrace. But while his career was thriving, his personal life was crumbling. Red married twice, and both marriages were filled with turmoil. But the deepest wound of his life came not from love, but from fatherhood. His beloved son, Richard, was only 9 years old when doctors delivered a devastating diagnosis: leukemia. At that time, medical science offered little hope. Red, who had spent his entire life bringing joy to strangers, could only watch as his child slipped away day by day. He visited hospitals, held his boy's hand, and prayed for a miracle that never came. In 1958, Richard passed away at just 10 years old, and Red was shattered. Friends later recalled how he wept like a broken man, unable to understand why fate had been so cruel. The man who made millions laugh could not laugh himself anymore. He kept working, of course, because that's what entertainers do. The show must go on. But behind the cameras, he carried a grief so deep that it became part of his very being. His jokes now came with a shadow, his smile with a memory of loss. He even painted clowns whose eyes were filled with tears, reflecting his own soul. To the world, he was still Red Skelton, the man of laughter, but to himself he was a father whose heart would never heal. And yet, he chose not to let the world see the full weight of his sorrow, hiding his pain behind the characters that America adored. The question was, how long could a man carry such grief without breaking completely? As the years passed, Red Skelton became more than a comedian. He became a living paradox. He was a man adored by millions, yet he lived in silence, protecting his pain like a secret wound. Fame can be a strange thing. It gives you everything the world thinks you want, while at the same time taking away the very things you need. For Red, fame was both a gift and a curse. It gave him the platform to make people laugh, but it also forced him to wear a mask of happiness when his soul was crying. He would finish a performance to thunderous applause, then return to an empty dressing room where the loneliness echoed louder than the cheers. His paintings of clowns, once playful, became sadder, almost haunting, as if he was telling the world the truth in colors where words could not. Friends and colleagues noticed that his humor had softened, that the sparkle in his eyes was fading. Yet Red never allowed bitterness to consume him. Instead, he turned his pain into lessons. On his show, he began weaving subtle messages about kindness, about hope, about the importance of faith and family. Viewers laughed, yes, but they also felt something deeper, something that touched their hearts. Perhaps that was his greatest strength. He could take personal tragedy and transform it into universal comfort. But privately, the cracks were visible. He never truly recovered from his son's death, nor from the loneliness that seemed to follow him despite his success. His later years were quieter, less in the spotlight, more devoted to painting and reflection. But even then, people wondered, how did a man who carried so much grief still manage to make the world smile? And the truth is, he didn't just make them laugh, he gave them hope. Even when his own heart was breaking, he reminded others that laughter was still possible. That is the paradox of Red Skelton, the sad clown who healed others while never healing himself. Red Skelton's story is not just about comedy. It is about the human condition, about the price of laughter, and about the fragility of joy. He taught the world something profound, that behind every laugh there can be a tear, and behind every smile, a struggle. His legacy lives on, not just in the characters he created, but in the hearts of those who remember him. When people look back at his life, they don't just remember the jokes or the slapstick. They remember the warmth, the kindness, the sense that he cared about his audience as if they were family. And maybe that was his way of filling the emptiness in his own heart, by loving the world when he had lost so much in his own life. His death in 1997 closed the curtain on one of the greatest performers America had ever known, but his influence remains alive. Every time someone laughs at clean humor, every time a clown is painted with tears in its eyes, every time a story reminds us that joy and sorrow walk hand in hand, Red Skelton is there. He was the man who made America laugh, but he also showed America that laughter and pain are not opposites, they are companions. And maybe that is why his story still matters. Because in a world that often hides its wounds, Red Skelton reminds us that it is possible to keep giving even when you are broken, to keep smiling even when your heart aches, and to keep loving even when life takes away the people you cherish most. That is the secret he was hiding, not just sorrow, but strength. And in the end, that strength is what made him unforgettable. His life was both comedy and tragedy, but above all, it was a testament to the resilience of the human spirit. And so, when the lights dim and the laughter fades, one truth remains. Red Skelton made America laugh, but what he was really giving the world was a piece of his soul.